Greetings, people. So today we're going to talk about multiple revenue streams. If your only source of income is from driving, that's okay. The only danger you have is what happens if, for health reasons or otherwise, you're not able to drive. You're totally dependent on one source of income. Ideally, you're a business person, you got to think strategically. You would have multiple streams of income. I have multiple streams of income. They're not as strong as I wish they would be, but I do have multiple streams of income. So for me, I have driving plus my investment portfolio plus a VA disability that pays me monthly. I'm working on generating additional streams of revenue on top of that. I know guys who are also veterans, different age groups, that were in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and they were a different branch. I was Navy, they were Army, and they got wounded combat. They're combat veterans. And they have VA disability ratings of 50% or more. It's significant. It's very significant. I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars per month. Now, they have pain for the rest of their life. So, it's not really something you want, but they do have. They have a Purple Heart. They have their VA disability pay every month. Okay? And they're retired military. You could do 20 years and retire from the military. So they're still in their 30s. They get retirement pay. They have their pension plus a VA disability plus their income from driving plus income from multiple other revenue sources. It's just like if a driver is married, husband and wife, the husband typically may be driving, and say the wife works, she has a regular job. They have multiple streams of revenue. They probably have they're a homeowner, and they have home equity. They have equity in their home. So they're doing quite well because they have multiple sources of income. And then you look at team drivers who are husband and wife, and they do extraordinarily well. They make equally, six-figure incomes. So together, they're bringing in over $200,000 a year. Typically a husband and wife team driver only drives brand new trucks, and they only own the truck for 2-3 years max. And then they trade and get another truck. I mean, they're putting, upwards of 200,000 miles on a truck a year because they're team driving. So when we think about gross revenue and earning potential for a driver, some drivers max out. They want 135,000 miles or more per year, and they max out that revenue. That's one way to do it. That's hard driving. That's a lot of driving. I'll be honest, that's more than I want to do. But God bless them, they want to do it. You don't have to do that. If you have other revenue streams, you can cut back on some of that driving. So I think the easiest way to go about it is and save and invest from the beginning, that as you get older, you can cut back on the driving because your investments are gaining steam. So you may start out with, a paltry sum of money, but in 10 years, that consistent saving and investing could grow significantly. You could get over $100,000 in an investment portfolio. The average S&P 500 average return is 10% per year. So even 10% of $100,000 is $10,000. If you wanted to, you could cut back on driving an equal amount. It's like, well, I don't need to drive as many miles because my investment portfolio is performing. I can afford to cut back on miles. If you get up to $200,000 in your investment portfolio, 10% is $20,000. So now you can cut back even more from your driving. And that's the average. Some years, the S&P 500 is 20% or 25%. So if you had $200,000 in an investment portfolio and you got 20%, you're looking at a $40,000 return on that investment in 1 year. You don't need to drive 135,000 miles or more, to have a good year. So the idea is, you're a business person, think strategically, think tactics. Do you want to drive 135,000 miles per year or more in order to generate revenue? Are there other ways to generate revenue that doesn't involve driving? Start thinking and creating multiple revenue streams. You have the resources. Well, driving is your main source of income, but it doesn't have to be your only source of income. I'm perfectly okay driving only 10,000 miles per month, 120,000 miles per year. It's perfectly fine because I have multiple streams of income. Yeah, I could drive more. It's enticing. I see some of the numbers the guys are putting up, and I'm like, wow, you're blowing me out of the water. But then I think about all the driving they've done. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I'd rather not have to do all that. If your goal is to retire as a millionaire, there's more than one way to go about doing that. There's 10 ways to skin that cat. Driving is one way, but it's not the only way. The goal remains the same. Retire at $1 million. How you get there is up to you. Your creativity, how much complexity you want to handle, how much driving do you want to do or not do. Can you generate multiple streams of revenue? You have business skills that you developed. Can you form a side hustle? If you're married, combined, your combined income, can you maximize that opportunity? So this idea of your only source of income being from driving, so therefore you have to drive in excess of 135,000 miles per hour. That's a hard way to go. That's it's doable, but it's very hard on your body. I question whether or not you can sustain that over a 20-year career. I recommend that as you get older, you cut back on the miles to take better care of your health, put more balance, find additional streams of revenue, cut back on some of that driving. But if that's what you want to do, God bless you, go for it. I'll still be impressed by those numbers, but I can reach my goals for retirement without having to drive as many miles. The end result will be the same. Whether or not you live long enough to enjoy retirement, that's a different story. So these guys are doing incredible miles. They may be dead before they get there. So you got to think about that as well. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.